Symphony of Canterlot, Chapter 1, Part 3. I decided to use the preferred tool of the common horned celt, or telekinesis, to take out my black snake leather bound notebook out of my overcoat. Why snake leather? Well, it's great for magic conductivity, but that little detail doesn't come into play yet. I wrote 4 specific glyphs in a vertical fashion, trusting that she knew what it meant. The pen I was using was nothing special though, not that it really matters anyway. I then ripped out the page and folded it 7 times. Then came the unusual part. I then took out one of the throwing knives I keep under my sleeve, used it to cut a small incision into my left forehoof, and then allowed my blood to drip exactly 3 times onto the folded page. After that, I charged it with a bit of magic and then I hoofed it over to Brew. This time, I decided to make eye contact. And with the same scowl that I expect, there he was, Hard Brew Knox, the eggshell white, blue-eyed, brown-maned sporting lightning strike of Baltimore, then the owner of a relatively strange cafe in the spank middle of Canterlot. He then took it with his mouth. The look on his face told me that he regretted that. He then flew off at full speed. The resulting gust of wind knocked my fedora off my head, so I quickly grabbed it with my telekinesis before it hit the ground and placed it on my head once more. And yes, it had a hole to accommodate my horn. I then took out my old silver pocket watch. It read 9:02, and the crowd couldn't have really been far. I could still somewhat hear them, and I had a decent idea where I was heading, so I got up and charged my horn once more to activate a little trinket I acquired from the ruins of Urasan. Yes, that Urasan. No, I'm not making this up. So now, where were we? Right. I was soon enveloped into the ethereal effect of the item I just mentioned. You want to know what the item is? Alright, so I never gave it a name, nor did I ever speak of it. It has just been my little secret for the last 10 years. I guess you can call it a perception-dampening amulet of sorts, considering that when I activate it, everyone seems to actively ignore me. I had no idea what its original Hyperborean creators called it, but it's a small coin covered in an unusual variant of cuneiform script. It's made out of a bronze-looking material that was, oddly enough, stronger than even steel. I kept it in a sewn-shut pocket in my black overcoat. It never leaves the coat. No one actually has seen it other than me, and in no way am I ever going to show it, even to you. I left to intercept the crowd, and it took me about 4 minutes to actually catch up with them though. I then started to follow them from a distance of 10 meters. As the time passed, the crowd started to dwindle away as more ponies felt that show was over and they could go back home. Eventually, Madame Octavia found a passing earthen-pulled cab. She called it in. To no one's surprise, she jumped right into the carriage and they both rode off. I observed that from the sidewalk right next to an alleyway, some 2 buildings from where she got onto the cab. I took out my silver pocket watch and I noticed that it was 10:21. I basically pursued her for more than an hour. Then and there, I heard the light clanking of enchanted polished brass armor gaining on me. I reacted by stepping into the alleyway and pressed my left side to the wall, and I saw 2 of Equestria's finest unicorn royal guards. Luckily, thanks to my perception-dampening amulet, the thought of simply looking to their left never really occurred to them. I counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and like that, they were about 9 meters away. I then decided to peek my head, noticing their lips moving. So, I decided to concentrate my hearing onto their direction, allowing me to use an old trick of mine where I could pick up sounds from a distance with the vibrations from the ambient ether reacting to the ground vibrations in the air. From what I could hear, the royal guard on the right said, "What are we even doing searching for this Earthmare? She doesn't seem like any fugitive I've ever seen. Heck, she even seems to be quite attractive." The one on the left replied with something that actually mattered to the situation on hoof. "Well, word on the station is that she is the daughter of some noble that the first lieutenant is really close to. A little too close for comfort, and the captain happens to be part of the same club, I hear." "So, this is just some half-assed political favor?" "Great," the guard on the right commented with quite the air of sarcasm, not liking what he just heard. And then there was the mention of the first lieutenant, head of the Canterlot Constabulary, which was another indicator pointing to him also being a member of the conglomerate of fanatics. It would explain why the Canterlot police had been trying to capture me for the last month or so. That bastard Arpeggio, yes, that Arpeggio, the composer. He must have asked him to capture me, or, well, probably kill me. They hadn't gotten close enough to me in Canterlot at the time to actually know which. As I finished thinking about what led me to my position back then, I decided to head back to Uncle Old's shop to freshen up. Then, had to go to Philharmonic Hall, and then talk to her peers in the Canterlot Orchestra. If my source was correct, then she started to go to practice the day before. They may have not have given me too much to work with though, but I would have taken anything at that point. If I just could have convinced them to help me, then I could, with luck, have arranged to speak to Octavia. Judging from the way she was walking back home, she must have really hated coming back to face dear old Dad. If that was the case, maybe, just maybe I could convince her to help me, and her testimony would have been worth her own weight in gold. Pages and Stories Bookshop, 11:35 a.m. When I opened up Uncle Archive's old shop, I always made sure to check my surroundings. Not by looking, mind you, but by simply listening and feeling to the flow of ether. Looking would give away the fact that something is out to kill you. Listening and focusing on specific ripples of ethereal energy just looks like you are trying to remember something. Most aren't the wiser to that. Most ponies that see me doing something like that even go as far as to think I'm just making a mental note. Sorry, but I don't need to stop moving to actually think, and I certainly don't need to look in the direction of an oncoming assault to properly counterattack. The war back in Zebrica left me with a rather set of unfortunate reflexes. It's not something you want to learn first off, trust me. And with that, I'll tell you that there is an old saying that goes, "Do not meddle in the affairs of wizards, for they are subtle and quick to anger." I sighed, realizing that there wasn't anyone to stab me, or try to stab me in the proverbial gut. Usually, you would expect an assassin when you are this tense, but no, my nerves just had been acting up. Once I thought that was enough though, I telekinetically took my key from my left coat pocket, opened the door, trotted in, and then closed the door, and I locked it again. Once I did, I noticed that the security was still working as the runes glowed orange with the ether that I had charged into the quartz batteries yesterday. I decided to take a look around the dusty old place. There were 2 shelved aisles and even shelves on the very walls of the place. Scattered stacks sitting by the lounge chairs next to the front desk were at my left once I entered. Shelves were filled to beyond capacity with some dusty tomes being placed horizontally on top of other tomes. There was barely any organization to the place, yet Uncle couldn't find anything in less than a minute. Uncle had the shelves, the chairs, and even the front desk made out of polished mahogany. They were expensive, mind you, but he was charismatic enough to always maintain a steady clientele. He even had students from the University of Canterlot going all the way down to Pegasus District for simple pulps. The place had more though. It held various tomes that held subjects for magic, history, various linguistics, dictionaries, old world and classical equestrian literature, geography, and various writings on fringe scientific discoveries. Needless to say, it was my favorite place to visit as a foal whenever Father was called to come home to Canterlot for some reason or another. It must have been the reason why he left me to the place in his will. As I continued to the back, I felt a slight chill in the back of my neck, though I decided to ignore it, as I already knew why that chill was there. I got up to the spiral staircase and opened up the hatch into what was formerly Uncle's and now my apartment. Once I entered, I saw the living room that had converted into my personal study by essentially building shelves into the walls and then placing Uncle's mahogany desk to the right side of the room. After looking around for traps, I entered my bedroom. Most of my chemistry equipment had been destroyed during the loss of my apartment, so what I had left back then was just a few beakers that I placed on a flimsy table that I had to nail onto the wall to the right of my bed for stability. I should probably try and find a safer area for that. In the opposite wall, I had what I like to call my shadow web. You think I spend all that time hiding out without monitoring any activity that may be involved in? I feel somewhat insulted. It's just a really large corkboard nailed with notes of local rumors and seemingly unrelated newspaper reports that speak of several interconnecting events that I had come to believe at the time were the work of them. It was right next to the last group photo that I took with my old friends from Manhattan back in, around 97. Yes, the camera used was one that was made before the invention of colored photography in that same year. Dust Bowl actually felt that it was appropriate to write "Through Tartarus and Back Again, Hearthswarming Eve 1998 on it. I miss that a lot. Signature, Dust, and I were quite the trio while we were growing up in Shull's kitchen. Yes, that signature. The president of the Brickling Sun. Yes, the Brickling Sun, the newspaper. Oh, right, the closet. From there, I fetched my ace in the hole, a modified for pony use 44 snub revolver. Now, you're probably asking a rather interesting question. Why do I have in my possession a gunpowder weapon? Especially back in the early years of Luna's return, when the idea of such weapons made most ponies nauseous? Well, it's because I'm a registered monster hunter, in addition to my private investigation license. It's not as rare as you'd think. Back in the early years of the current century, and even more so during my father's own youth, ponies practicing more than one profession were so common that it was practically considered the norm. You see, due to the Hunter Act of 912 CR that allowed registered monster hunters to carry and own weapons. After placing the revolver in my coat, I then closed the closet door and locked it. And then I threw on my hat onto the general direction of my bed. If I was gonna head out, I had to check just how lethargic I looked. I really couldn't afford to look like I could collapse at any minute. If I was gonna coax information out of any pony that day, I at least needed to look like I could at least listen. I went to the rather Spartan-esque mirrored medicine cabinet over to my bathroom sink, and I looked like crap. I had a 5 o'clock shadow, a somewhat disheveled black mane, and dark circles under my amber eyes. My grayish-blue color already gave ponies enough reason to feel uncomfortable around me to begin with, but then it seemed like I was only a step away from being a vagabond. My coat looked as dusty as ever to add an additional jab of the old pride. So I decided to start mending the situation by opening the tab and throwing cold water onto my face.